Welcome to the Shadow MPC for Yorkshire in partnership with Clive Owen LLP and the York Press. The UK's Consumer Price Index rose to 4.2% in the 12 months to October 2021, up from 3.1% in September. The Deputy Governor of the Bank of England has said that inflation was comfortably exceeding 5% by the spring of next year, and he warned that the path of the economy is extremely uncertain. In a speech at the Leeds Business School, he said, quote, "What we can do and what is best possible approach is to think at every meeting about the level of interest rates that will maximise our chances a couple of years from now of hitting the inflation target." Unemployment in Yorkshire and the Humber was 4.6%. Yorkshire and the North West look set to see the UK's greatest house price growth over the next 5 years, according to the latest revised figures from Savills. Both regions are expected to record an increase of 18.8% between 2022 and 2026, with prime property at the top end of the market rising by nearly 20%. So there's some data that maybe MPC members want to consider, but our Shadow MPC definitely does. They're made up of people who represent businesses across Yorkshire, including Clive Owen LLP, our sponsor. So I'm going to start by asking our business representatives what about the economic climate in which their business is operating. And then after we've gone round them all, we're going to ask them what their view is on interest rates ahead of the Bank of England making its real decision later this week. Let's start with Gary Smith from Tinley Wealth Management. Gary, how does your business see the economy?
I think in the industry I work in, we are a good barometer of when the economy is either doing very well or in the start of a recession. And what I mean by that is we see it first. So people cut back on doing their pension contributions, they don't invest as much, they start to take withdrawals. But we're not seeing that, quite the opposite. It remains very busy. Businesses that we deal with remain heavy with cash. Pension funding continues. People still looking to invest. The markets are down from their pre-COVID highs in the UK, not the same globally. So we're not seeing any sort of fallback in that position. The people I deal with and work with, we're not seeing anybody being made redundant or any businesses getting into financial difficulty. So from that perspective, it remains quite buoyant. What is a concern is inflation and Omicron. So that is having an impact on global markets, and the global markets do fluctuate. They are very much sentiment driven rather than market data driven. So we are looking to manage people's wealth to take advantage of these situations and protect them from short-term falls. But at the moment, who knows what will happen with Omicron, whether or not we'll be in lockdown in the new year or further restrictions. But in terms of business, remains very busy. I can't believe it's Christmas next week because it still seems very busy. So very positive from that perspective, and we're not seeing any sort of slowdown that would indicate that businesses are struggling.
Gary, if I was to force choice you, which would it be the greater threat to business and the future? Would it be inflation or Omicron in your view?
Short-term Omicron, because unless the Chancellor announces a support package, Christmas parties are getting cancelled. Who's going to support the hospitality sector? Okay. There's no furlough scheme. That's my biggest concern in the short term.
Let's move on to our next contributor, Delroy Beverly. Now, Delroy, you're chair of the IOD in the region. You also work in the NHS. Tell us your view of what you see the economy being like at the moment.
I think, and thank you for the question, I think Gary articulates it quite well. Certainly from my perspective, so looking at it through two sets of lenses. So within the public health sector, we're pretty much insulated as a result of that. The colleagues will be aware that there is funding there in place that is driving, that is sort of supporting the Prime Minister's aim to get people injected, so on and so on and so on. I think when I look at the wider lens in terms of the IOD, we're not seeing any information that would suggest that there are significant challenges from any particular groups. I think, in fact, I would consider that we're going through a new phase with this Omicron and all of the challenges that brings. But certainly from the businesses that I speak to, that upturn that they were recently enjoying, there's a little bit of nervousness in terms of a potential lockdown and a further phase of sort of COVID and Omicron and all that entails. To Gary's point, I think the hospitality sector, certainly within our regions, we're seeing loads of cancellation, not me personally, but organizations are seeing a lot of things cancelled. People are taking the cautious route, particularly when you think about all of the media noise that still continues about Christmas parties, quizzes, call it whatever you wish. So I think for me, to your question, I think for me, it's sort of wait and see. We don't know what we don't know. I think the next few weeks, possibly a couple of months, will then start to unfold a few things.
Thanks, Delroy. We're going to move on to Charlene Lyons now, who's the Chief Executive of Black Sheep Brewery, a brilliant Yorkshire brand. Everyone's going to enjoy, I certainly hope everyone's going to enjoy a pint of Black Sheep over Christmas. Charlene, what do you see as the sentiment in your sector? I presume you might pick up on what's just been said.
Yes, thank you. I work in hospitality, we work in hospitality, and we're seeing many economic challenges, huge amounts. We've got the challenge around just day-to-day retail, cancelled bookings. The COVID recovery has been slower than we had anticipated it would be, and customer confidence still is not back to where we hoped it would be. The new variant has proven to be problematic, as you would all imagine. And not only that, we've got the day-to-day challenges around cost increases, inflationary pressures, overheads, lack of support. So it's a real struggle for people in our industry. And because of the way that we work with different customers and different channels, whether it be e-com, whether it be supermarkets, whether it be local landlords, everyone's got their own problems and their own issues. And for us, we're trying to find that happy medium. So there's an awful lot of work that's going into the economic operational side of how we're trying to manage our day-to-day. It's a challenge.
You run a number of pubs. Would you have a staff Christmas gathering?
We've actually cancelled our big staff Christmas party because we just didn't feel that it was safe. Our priority is making sure that Christmas isn't cancelled for our staff with their families. And I don't think any of us would have been able to forgive ourselves if there was a mass outbreak and people weren't able to do actually what they are so craving over that 3 or 4 day bank holiday period. People have had individual departmental parties, but not on the scale that we would usually have. So,
and as an individual, will you go into one of your pubs?
Of course.
There we are. All right. So it's not as all-encompassing as all that. All right. Well, Charlene, thank you very much. Let's move on to Chris Greene now from PIB Insurance. Hello, Chris.
Hi there, Rob.
So tell us about your sector and how do you feel about the way the economy is operating?
I mean, we live in a very eclectic world in insurance broking. So, there are winners and losers within the pandemic. There are winners and losers in the business as a whole. The business as a whole is thriving. However, I echo Gary's sentiments and everybody else's sentiments about the dystopia that's been faced by the hospitality sector, and it's absolutely critical that we get some sort of grants or funding to them. Other areas are doing really well. The care home sector is doing really well. Construction is doing exceptionally well. So, and retail's doing okay. So, we see winners and losers in all this.
Okay, let's thank you very much, Chris. Let's move on to our next contributor, Kerry Hope from Castle Employment. Now, inflation is, of course, the prime driver of the shadow MPC and the real MPC. And one of the things about inflation are wages. Give us a little bit of your experience on the economy in that bit as well, please, Kerry.
Yeah, no problems. So we are seeing a buoyant market in the permanent recruitment sector specifically. It's still very tight. Still a very tight labour market, but there's a mismatch between unemployment and the jobs that are available. Huge shortage and efforts to attract, which is leading to further increases in salaries. The Office of National Statistics are saying a 5.8% in this last quarter. So massive peer pressure on higher salaries for higher paid jobs, and candidates are becoming so much more demanding. So much more higher wages, expectations around flexible working from home, hours that are required because they're very aware that they have the upper hand, if you like. We are seeing the market not moving anywhere near what it was pre-pandemic, and that's mainly because some candidates do still have a lack of confidence in the market, and this Omicron now again is going to really make people question if they want to make that move because of things like furlough and the start dates when they might join. But in addition to that, we've seen a real peak in candidate loyalty. So candidates now, employees are now wanting to really stay true to their employers if they've looked after them over the last 18 months. So it's two-sided, really. The candidates aren't moving because they've got lack of confidence, but they're also, really quite loyal to their current employer. And obviously, it's just about it's like a game of dominoes, really. Once one moves, the market starts moving. But many of our industries that we support are continued to be plagued by labour and skill shortages, and that, along with what they're talking to us about, is supply chain, price of raw materials, as well as this ability to not be able to find the staff to deliver. So I think Omicron will definitely slow the market for us in Q1 because I think employees might just not decide to take that hire, or candidates might just decide not to move.
Okay, and Kerry, just to push you a little bit on that last point you're making, supply chain issues, cost controls, has inflation started to hit the wages that are needed to get people into jobs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's go back to our grid and call people who haven't yet been called. Charlene, Steve Lowe, we haven't called you yet. Hello, Steve. And you're from Local IQ. That's, of course, the people that run the news, the York Press. So pleased to have you on. Thank you very much, and thank you for carrying this.
Hey, afternoon, everyone. I think I just echo everyone else, really. For us, it's all about confidence. The last 3 months has seen the high street get busier. Confidence has started to grow, and I think the last 2 weeks have just kicked confidence, really, and people are, across all of our sectors, are all quite nervous of what the new year is going to bring, and I think that will impact hugely on the economy. Of
course, newspaper advertising is a great indicator of the economy. Is it brisk at the moment?
Well, it depends where you look, and on different levels. I mean, if you take Kerry's point, recruitment is challenged because people aren't moving. The motor sector is tight, but that's down to their inability to get new cars into the UK with all the right parts. The high street has got better, and leisure and hospitality was just catching up, really, and almost has stopped overnight. They were getting across Yorkshire, getting geared up for a very bountiful Christmas, and I'm not, and I think there's a nervousness now.
And property?
No, property's been really buoyant, and as everyone knows, it's been a seller's market for the last 6 months. You mentioned that the growth in house prices, and that's continuing at the moment. So property sectors continue to go really well. The rental market is pushing prices up because of demand, which I'm not quite sure is good for the long term. But yeah, the last 3 months as we've come out of summer, and we thought that double jabbed, as a key word that we'd never heard of a year ago, was now everyone is that we could get on and get the economy back up and running and get on with life. And I think the last 2 or 3 weeks has made everyone almost go back 12 months. I feel like a game of snakes and ladders. Yes. In this world, I thought I'd got to the top of the ladder and the snake has come along, and I'm not quite sure how far down the slippery slope we're going to go.
That's a very good analogy. I don't know if it's the biggest snake, but probably is certainly a small or medium one.
I think the fact is that we don't know. We don't know whether it's is it going to be the 2 week work from home, get us through Christmas, and we can go again, or is there something around the corner? And it's the fact we don't know, I think, and the unknowing for me is what breeds confidence or lack of confidence if we don't know where we're going.
All right, let's bring on our sponsor, which is Rob Whitehead from Clive Owen LLP. Hello, Rob. What's your take on it all?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously working in the accountancy sector, we act for a lot of businesses and see a lot of different sectors and how they're performing. And the general overview is most most businesses and sectors are doing quite well and are quite buoyant. And we've got clients in the leisure industry and hotels, etc., that have done very well this year. But obviously, still some uncertainty, and this latest working from home directive is going to impact that, and cancelling Christmas parties, etc. We are heading into the sort of quieter time in winter when hotels and catering businesses do have a quiet time after Christmas. So there is a lot of uncertainty around there. But generally, although businesses are buoyant, there is caution in there, and every sector is experiencing cost rises, shortage in supply chain, whether that's Brexit or pandemic related or a mixture of the two. And labour, shortage of labour, it's affecting all sectors as well. So things are very fragile, and like a few people have said, it's all about confidence.
All right.
But I think a lot of people are looking at investment to try and solve problems. Looking at outsourcing or automation to help with the labour situation where they can. But that's not all industries can do that. But where they can, people want to invest and want to try and solve problems and move forward. And then from the consumer's perspective, there's a lot of things out of their control. It's fuel prices, power, things like food affected by wheat prices. It's just out of the consumer's control, and they're just seeing costs increase. So it's quite tough to try and talk about increasing interest rates and putting extra costs onto business and consumers, to be honest. But
okay, well, thank you very much, Rob. Let's put everyone on screen. We're going to call for your votes on interest rates in a minute. But before I do, let's just challenge you all. That's the front page of a national newspaper earlier last week. It says the Bank of England warns price rises will bite even harder. Now, if you were members of the real MPC, you would have to take a vote this week to decide whether or not to nudge interest rates up by 0.25% or thereabouts. Now, that would be designed to tackle future inflationary pressures, and you'd be responsible not just for your own businesses, but for pensioners who might have savings that are being eroded by high inflation, or for people whose jobs might be affected by high inflation. And your primary role as a shadow MPC member is the control of inflation. Now, does anyone have any comment on me pushing back at you all on this before you make your vote? Gary particularly, because I know you follow these things with a great deal of interest, and previously you've gone for nudging interest rates up. But before we have a vote, how would you tackle that point, that there is a responsibility to tackle inflation?
I think there is, but I think it's the elephant in the room that the Bank of England are meant to be independent, but the government have borrowed a significant sum of money to get us through COVID, and any sort of rise in interest rates will increase interest payments on government debt, which then leads to rises in taxation, which will ultimately lead to unemployment. So it's a very fine line, but I think the Bank of England's saving grace in some respect could be Omicron, because where spending will reduce, you could see job losses as a result of Omicron, and pressure on inflation could result. So although Omicron is not welcome and is going to have an impact upon things in the short term, it could give the Bank of England the breathing space it needs as hopefully inflation starts to unwind during 2022.
Are there any other comments before I call the vote? No. Okay, so this is how we'll call the vote. The first vote, put your hand up if you feel that the Bank of England should stimulate the economy in some form, maybe through some more quantitative easing. No. No? Was that a show of hands for more? Yes, one. That's Gary. The next question is, does anyone on the panel feel that the Bank of England should suppress the economy more by increasing interest rates by a small amount? No, 0. And finally, members of the panel, does everyone feel that Bank of England should leave interest rates settled at where they are? Votes for that, please. And that's unanimous. So unanimous on voting for a maintenance of current interest rates, and a minority vote for a little bit more stimulation of the economy through QE. Members of the Shadow MPC for Yorkshire and Humber, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again in a few months. Thank you very much.